Parents told me to cover my sister's $3,000 credit card bill. I refused. Days later, they demanded to give her my car. I said no. They called me selfish and tossed me out. 1 year later, they called me. My name is Jessica, and this is the story of how my own family tried to use me as their personal ATM, and what happened when I finally said no. I'm 24 now, but this all started when I was 23. I had just finished college and landed my first real job as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized tech company in Austin. I was making $48,000 a year, which felt like a fortune after years of surviving on ramen noodles and student loans. I was living with my parents temporarily while I saved up for my own place, paying them $300 a month in rent, which was more than fair considering I was also helping with groceries and utilities. My younger sister Madison is 3 years younger than me, and she's always been the golden child. Where I was studious and responsible, Madison was spontaneous and charming. Our parents, Robert and Linda Mitchell, absolutely adored her free spirit. They paid for her college completely while I had to take out loans. They bought her a brand new Honda Civic for her 18th birthday while I drove a beat-up 2008 Toyota Corolla that I purchased myself with money from my part-time job at Target. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister. But the favoritism was always there, glaring and obvious. Madison could do no wrong, while I was expected to be the responsible one, the one who had her life together, the one who would always be there to clean up any messes. The first red flag should have been when Madison came home from college for Thanksgiving break, designer bags in tow, talking about her amazing shopping sprees and weekend trips to Dallas. She was a junior majoring in communications, and from what I could tell, she was majoring more in partying than studying. But our parents just smiled and called her adventurous. It was a cold Tuesday in February when everything started to unravel. I had just gotten home from work, still in my business casual attire, when I found the whole family sitting around the dining room table with serious expressions. My stomach immediately dropped. "Jessica, honey, sit down," Mom said, patting the chair next to her. "We need to talk about something important." I sat down cautiously, looking between my parents and Madison, who was staring at her hands and looked uncharacteristically subdued. "Now, we don't want you to panic," Dad began, which immediately made me want to panic. "But Madison has gotten herself into a little financial trouble." "It's not that big of a deal," Madison mumbled, still not making eye contact. Mom reached over and squeezed Madison's hand supportively. "Sweetheart, it's okay. We'll figure this out together as a family." That's when Dad dropped the bombshell. Madison owes $3,127 on her credit card, and the minimum payments have gotten too high for her to manage on her part-time job income. I blinked, trying to process this information. How did she rack up $3,000 in credit card debt? "It just happened gradually," Madison said defensively. "College is expensive, and I needed things for school and, to fit in with my friends." "What kind of things?" I pressed. Madison's cheeks flushed. "Just normal stuff. Clothes, going out to eat, some trips with friends. Everyone does it." I looked at my parents, waiting for them to address the obvious irresponsibility here, but instead, Mom jumped in to defend her. "College is a formative time, Jessica. Madison is learning about life and making connections. These experiences are important." "More important than financial responsibility?" I asked, incredulous. Dad cleared his throat. "That's actually why we wanted to talk to you. We think the best solution would be for you to help Madison pay off this debt." The room went silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. I stared at my father, certain I had misheard him. "I'm sorry, what?" "You have a steady income now," Mom explained. "And you're living here practically for free. We thought you could take over Madison's credit card payments until it's paid off. That would be about $150 a month for the next 2 years, Dad added, as if he was presenting me with a reasonable business proposition. I felt like I was in an alternate reality. "You want me to pay off Madison's credit card debt? The debt she accumulated buying things she couldn't afford?" "It's not like that," Madison finally spoke up. "I'll pay you back eventually." "Eventually?" "When I graduate and get a job," she said weakly. I looked around the table at my family, all staring at me expectantly, and I felt something crack inside me. Here I was, the daughter who had worked part-time jobs since I was 16, who had taken out student loans, who had been responsible and careful with money my entire life. And they wanted me to bail out my sister, who had been handed everything and still managed to mess it up. "No," I said simply. The word hung in the air like a grenade. "No?" Mom repeated, as if she hadn't heard correctly. "No, I will not pay off Madison's credit card debt. She's 21 years old, not 12. She made these choices, and she needs to deal with the consequences. Dad's face started to turn red. Jessica, this is your sister we're talking about. Family helps family. Where was this family helps family mentality when I was working 25 hours a week while going to school full-time to avoid taking on more debt? Where was it when I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner because I couldn't afford groceries and didn't want to ask for help? That was different, Mom said dismissively. You were always so independent. We knew you could handle it. And Madison can't handle the consequences of her own actions? Madison's eyes filled with tears. Jess, please. I'm really scared about this debt. The interest rate is so high, and I don't know how I'm going to pay it off. For a moment, I almost caved. Madison looked so young and vulnerable, and despite everything, I did love her. But then I remembered all the times I had struggled and pushed through on my own, all the times I had been told I was so capable and so responsible while Madison was coddled and protected from every hardship. Then maybe you should get a second job, I said firmly. Or sell some of those designer clothes you bought with money you didn't have. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I can't believe how selfish you're being, Mom said, her voice tight with anger. This is not the daughter we raised. Actually, this is exactly the daughter you raised. You raised me to be independent and responsible. You just didn't expect me to apply those principles to this situation. Dad slammed his hand on the table. That's enough. You're going to help your sister, and that's final. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. No, I'm not. And you can't make me. I walked upstairs to my room and closed the door, my hands shaking with adrenaline. I had never stood up to my parents like that before. Part of me felt terrible, but a bigger part of me felt liberated. The next few days were tense. My parents barely spoke to me, communicating only in curt, necessary exchanges. Madison avoided me entirely. The atmosphere in the house was suffocating, but I held my ground. I thought that was the end of it. I thought they would find another solution, maybe make Madison get a second job or ask other relatives for help. I was wrong. The following Saturday morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop, working on some freelance graphic design projects I had picked up to boost my savings, when Dad walked in with his coffee. Jessica, we need to talk, he said, sitting down across from me. I saved my work and closed the laptop, bracing myself for another argument about Madison's debt. Your mother and I have been thinking about Madison's situation, he began. And we've come up with a solution that doesn't involve you paying her credit card bill. I felt a wave of relief. Good. What did you decide? We think Madison should have your car. I stared at him blankly. I'm sorry, what? Your car. Madison needs reliable transportation to get to work so she can pay off her debt. Her current car is old and unreliable. Madison drove a 2015 Honda Civic with 60,000 miles on it. My car was a 2019 Toyota Camry that I had bought certified pre-owned the previous year. I had saved up for months for the down payment and was making monthly payments of $320. Dad, Madison's car is 3 years newer than my old car was. And I'm still making payments on the Camry. Well, you could take over her car payments instead. They're much lower. I felt that familiar sensation of reality tilting sideways. You want me to give Madison my car, which I'm paying for with my own money, so she can have more reliable transportation to pay off debt that she accumulated irresponsibly. When you put it like that, it sounds unreasonable, but it sounds unreasonable because it is unreasonable. I interrupted. Dad, I need my car to get to work. I need it to get to my freelance meetings. I need it to live my life. Madison needs it more right now. Based on what logic? Dad's jaw tightened. Based on the logic that she's struggling and you're not. I'm not struggling because I make good decisions. I saved up for that car. I researched insurance rates and loan terms. I budget for the monthly payment. This is insane. Mom walked into the kitchen at that moment, clearly having heard the raised voices. What's insane is your attitude toward your sister, she said coldly. Madison is going through a difficult time, and instead of helping her, you're being incredibly selfish. How is keeping the car that I pay for being selfish? Because you could easily take over Madison's car in payment, Mom replied. It would save you money, actually. I don't want to save money. I want the car I chose and am paying for. Madison appeared in the doorway, looking like she'd been crying. I heard you guys talking, she said quietly. Maybe this isn't a good idea. For a moment, I thought she was going to be reasonable, that she was going to tell our parents that asking for my car was too much. You're right, I said. It's not a good idea. But Madison continued, maybe I should just drop out of school and work full-time to pay off the debt. It was emotional manipulation at its finest, and I watched my parents fall for it completely. Absolutely not, Dad said immediately. Education is too important. Madison, sweetheart, you're so close to graduating, Mom added. We'll figure something else out. They both turned to look at me expectantly. No, I said before they could even ask again. I am not giving Madison my car. The silence that followed was deafening. Fine, Dad said finally, his voice ice cold. Then I think it's time for you to find your own place. My stomach dropped. What? You heard me. If you can't be part of this family's solution, then maybe you shouldn't be part of this family's household. Mom nodded in agreement. We raised you to care about others, Jessica. But clearly, that didn't stick. I looked at Madison, waiting for her to say something, to tell them this was going too far. But she just stood there, tears streaming down her face, looking like the victim in all of this. You're kicking me out because I won't give Madison my car? I asked, still not quite believing this was happening. We're asking you to move out because you're not acting like family, Mom corrected. Family doesn't ask family to pay for their irresponsible decisions, I shot back. Get out, Dad said quietly. Pack your things and get out of my house. The next few hours were a blur. I called in sick to work and spent the day packing my belongings into garbage bags and boxes. My parents didn't speak to me. Madison locked herself in her room. I felt like I was in a nightmare. I had been saving money for my own apartment, but I hadn't expected to need it so suddenly. I found a small one-bedroom place across town that I could move into immediately, though the rent would stretch my budget thin. As I loaded the last of my boxes into my car, Mom came outside. This doesn't have to be permanent, she said, her voice softer than it had been all day. You can come home anytime. You just need to think about what family means. I looked at the woman who had raised me, who had taught me to work hard and be responsible, who was now asking me to abandon those principles for my sister's benefit. I know exactly what family means, Mom, I said. I just don't think we have the same definition. I drove away from my childhood home with everything I owned packed into my car, and I didn't look back. The next year was the hardest and best year of my life. Living on my own was expensive and sometimes lonely, but it was also incredibly liberating. I threw myself into work and my freelance projects. I made new friends through work and various activities. I learned to cook properly, decorated my apartment exactly how I wanted it, and discovered that I actually really liked my own company. The first few weeks were brutal. I cried myself to sleep most nights, not because I regretted my decision, but because the silence from my family was deafening. I kept expecting them to call, to apologize, to realize how unreasonable they had been. But my phone remained stubbornly quiet. I threw myself into establishing my new routine. My apartment was a modest one-bedroom in a complex about 20 minutes from work, but it was mine. The walls were bare when I moved in, and I slowly filled them with prints and photos that reflected my taste, not my mother's traditional decorating style. I bought a small dining table from a thrift store and refinished it myself, watching YouTube tutorials until I got it right. It felt like a metaphor for rebuilding my life from scratch. Work became my sanctuary. My boss, Sarah Henderson, was a woman in her 40s who had built her marketing career from the ground up. She noticed my increased dedication and started giving me more challenging projects. I found myself staying late not because I had to, but because I genuinely enjoyed the work and the sense of accomplishment it gave me. You seem different lately, Sarah commented one afternoon as we reviewed a campaign I had developed for a new client. More focused. More confident. I've had some changes in my personal life, I said carefully. Good changes, I think. Sarah nodded knowingly. Sometimes we have to lose things that aren't serving us to find out what we're really capable of. It was during this time that I started therapy. I had always thought therapy was for people with real problems, but the family situation had left me questioning everything I thought I knew about relationships and boundaries. My therapist, Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, helped me understand that what I was experiencing wasn't just a family disagreement, it was emotional manipulation and financial abuse disguised as family loyalty. Your parents created a dynamic where love was conditional on compliance, she explained during one of our sessions. When you refused to comply, they withdrew their love and support. That's not healthy family behavior. The therapy sessions were eye-opening. I realized that the pattern had been there my entire life. I was praised when I was useful and criticized when I prioritized my own needs. Madison, meanwhile, was loved unconditionally, which ironically hadn't served her well either. She had never learned to be self-sufficient because she had never needed to be. Dr. Rodriguez also helped me work through the guilt I felt about abandoning my family. You didn't abandon them, she reminded me repeatedly. You set boundaries. They chose to respond to those boundaries by cutting contact. That was their choice, not yours. Around month 3, something unexpected happened. I was grocery shopping on a Saturday morning when I ran into my high school friend Ashley Chen at the produce section. We had been close in high school but had drifted apart during college. Jessica. Oh my God, how are you? She squealed, giving me a huge hug. We spent an hour catching up over coffee at the Starbucks in the grocery store. When I mentioned I was living on my own now, she got excited. You should come to game night at my place. I have this group of friends who get together every other Friday. We play board games and eat too much pizza. You'd fit right in. I almost declined out of habit. I had always been the type to go home to my family on weekends. But what was I going home to now? I'd love to, I said, and meant it. That Friday night changed everything. Ashley's friend group was a mix of people in their 20s and early 30s, all navigating adult life in their own ways. There was Marcus, a nurse who made everyone laugh with his stories from the ER, Jennifer, a teacher who was incredibly passionate about her work, and Trevor, a graphic designer who freelanced like I did and gave me some great tips for finding higher-paying clients. For the first time in months, I spent an entire evening without thinking about my family situation. I laughed until my stomach hurt, stayed up past midnight, and felt like I was part of something again. You seem surprised that you're having fun, Jennifer observed as we were cleaning up the game pieces. I guess I am, I admitted. I've been going through some family stuff, and I wasn't sure I remembered how to be social. Well, you're stuck with us now, Marcus announced. We meet every other Friday, and attendance is mandatory. I started looking forward to those Friday nights more than anything else in my week. The group accepted me without question, never prying into my family's situation beyond what I chose to share. When I did eventually tell them the whole story, they were uniformly supportive. Dude, your parents were totally out of line, Trevor said, shaking his head. I can't imagine asking my brother to pay off my credit card debt. The car thing was especially crazy, Ashley added. That's not how family works. Having their validation helped counteract the voice in my head that still sometimes whispered that maybe I had been selfish, maybe I should have just helped Madison to keep the peace. My freelance business also started to take off during this time. Trevor introduced me to some of his clients, and word of mouth began to spread. I was designing logos, business cards, and marketing materials for small businesses around Austin. The extra income was a lifesaver, allowing me to build up my emergency fund and even start saving for a down payment on a house someday. I didn't hear from my family for months. No calls, no texts, no emails. It was like I had been erased from their lives. It hurt, but it also reinforced that I had made the right decision. If their love was conditional on my willingness to bankroll Madison's mistakes, then it wasn't really love at all. The silence was broken only once, about 4 months after I moved out. I was at Target buying household supplies when I literally ran into my Aunt Carol, my mom's sister, at the end of an aisle. Jessica, she said, looking genuinely surprised to see me. How are you, honey? Your mom said you moved out. I'm doing well, I said carefully, not sure how much my parents had told her about the circumstances. She said there was some kind of disagreement about Madison's college expenses. I could tell from her tone that my parents had given her a very sanitized version of events. Something like that, I said diplomatically. Carol studied my face. You know, I always admired how independent you were, even as a little girl. I told your mother she was lucky to have such a responsible daughter. Thank you. I hope you all work things out, she said, giving me a warm hug. But I want you to know, whatever happened, I think you're a wonderful young woman. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. As she walked away, I felt a mixture of gratitude for her kindness and sadness that she might be the only family member who would ever see my side of things. I did hear through mutual friends that Madison had eventually gotten a second job at a retail store and was slowly paying off her debt. I was glad she was taking responsibility, even if it had taken a family explosion to get there. I also heard that she had broken up with her boyfriend, the one she had been spending money trying to keep up with, and that she seemed more focused on school. Around month 6, I had a moment that really drove home how much I had changed. I was at the mall with Jennifer, helping her pick out an outfit for a job interview, when we passed the jewelry store where Madison used to love to browse. Without thinking, I found myself looking for a necklace she had mentioned wanting for her birthday. Who's that for? Jennifer asked, noticing me examining the jewelry. My sister, I said automatically, then stopped. Actually, never mind. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. The sister who got you kicked out of your house? She didn't get me kicked out, I said defensively, then caught myself. Well, I mean, she did, but not intentionally. Jess, can I say something without you getting mad? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. You've told us the whole story about what happened with your family. Your sister stood by and watched your parents ask you to pay her debt and give her your car. When you said no, she let them kick you out without saying a word in your defense. And now you're shopping for her birthday present? I stared at the necklace in the display case, feeling foolish. I know you love her, Jennifer continued gently. But love doesn't mean you have to keep giving to people who take advantage of you. I put the necklace back and walked away from the jewelry store. Jennifer was right, and I knew it. I had been so conditioned to take care of Madison that I was still doing it even after she had let me be thrown out of my family home. About 8 months after I moved out, I got a promotion at work. My new salary was $58,000, and I finally felt like I was building a real career. Sarah called me into her office on a Tuesday afternoon and offered me the position of senior marketing coordinator, with more responsibility and a team of 2 junior coordinators reporting to me. I've been watching your work over the past year, she said. You've shown real leadership potential, and frankly, you've become indispensable around here. How do you feel about taking on more responsibility? I felt like crying with relief and pride. I would love that opportunity. Good. Your new salary will be $58,000, plus you'll be eligible for performance bonuses. The promotion is effective immediately. I celebrated by taking myself out to a nice dinner at a restaurant I had always wanted to try but couldn't afford before. Sitting alone at the table, looking at the menu without worrying about the prices, I felt genuinely proud of myself for the first time in years. I had done this. I had built a life and a career without anyone's help, and I was succeeding. At the 10-month mark, I started dating someone I met through work. His name was David Martinez, and he was a software developer who had been brought in to help with some of our digital marketing initiatives. He was quiet and thoughtful, with dark hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. We started as friends, grabbing coffee to discuss project requirements, but I found myself looking forward to those meetings more than I should have. David was smart and funny, and he actually listened when I talked about my work. He never made me feel like I was being too ambitious or too focused on my career. Our first real date was to a food truck festival downtown. We spent hours walking around, trying different cuisines and talking about everything from our favorite books to our biggest fears. When I told him about my family situation, he listened without judgment and didn't try to give me advice or tell me what I should do. That must have been incredibly hard, he said simply. I can't imagine having to choose between my principles and my family. The hardest part is that I keep second-guessing myself, I admitted. Like maybe I could have handled it differently. David stopped walking and turned to face me. Can I tell you what I see when I look at you? I nodded, curious. I see someone who worked her way through college, landed a great job, got promoted within a year, runs a successful freelance business on the side, and has the strength to stand up for what she believes in even when it costs her everything. I see someone who has her life together in a way that most people our age don't. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Thank you. Your family didn't see your worth, Jess. That's their loss, not your failure. David had his own place, a small house he was buying in South Austin, and actually seemed impressed by my independence and work ethic. It was a refreshing change from my family's constant criticism. He never made me feel like I was too much or not enough. With him, I could just be myself. We took things slowly, both of us having been hurt in previous relationships. But over the months, I found myself falling for his steady presence and genuine support. He celebrated my freelance successes and was there to listen when I had bad days at work. He never tried to fix my problems or tell me what to do, he just supported me in finding my own solutions. By month 11, David and I were spending most of our free time together, and I was happier than I had been in years. My friend group had embraced him completely, and he fit seamlessly into our Friday night game sessions. I had built a life that felt authentic and fulfilling, filled with people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide for them. I had just started thinking that maybe I was better off without my family when my phone rang on a Tuesday evening in February, almost exactly 1 year after the credit card confrontation. It was Mom. Jessica? Her voice was tentative, uncertain. Hi, Mom. My heart was racing, but I kept my voice neutral. How are you, honey? I'm fine. How are you? There was a long pause. We're not doing well, actually. That's why I'm calling. I waited, not willing to make this easy for her. Your father lost his job 3 weeks ago, she continued. The company downsized, and they let go of a lot of the older employees. Dad had worked as an operations manager at a manufacturing company for 15 years. I was shocked, but I still didn't say anything. We're having trouble making the mortgage payment, Mom went on. And Madison? Well, Madison dropped out of school. What? She dropped out last semester. She said college wasn't for her, and she wanted to focus on her music career. Madison had been in a band in high school, but I had no idea she was still pursuing music. She moved to Los Angeles 2 months ago to try to make it as a singer, Mom continued. She's not helping us financially at all. She says she's barely making ends meet with her restaurant job. I felt a familiar mix of emotions, anger, vindication, and surprisingly, concern for my parents. I'm sorry to hear about Dad's job, I said carefully. We were wondering. Mom's voice became smaller. We were wondering if you might be able to help us out. Just temporarily, until your father finds another job. The irony was so thick I could taste it. After kicking me out for refusing to pay Madison's credit card bill, they were now asking me for money to pay their mortgage. How much do you need? I asked. Just $800 a month. That would cover the difference between your father's unemployment and our mortgage payment. $800 a month. More than twice what they had originally asked me to pay for Madison's credit card. Mom, let me ask you something, I said. Where's Madison in all this? Why isn't she helping? She's pursuing her dreams, Jessica. We can't ask her to give that up. But you can ask me to give up $800 a month? You have a good job. You're stable. And whose fault is that? Did I get stable by accident, or did I get stable by making good decisions and working hard? Mom was quiet for a long moment. Please, Jessica. We're desperate. We might lose the house. I closed my eyes and thought about everything that had happened over the past year. I thought about the nights I had cried myself to sleep, missing my family but knowing I had done the right thing. I thought about the strength I had built, the confidence I had gained, the life I had created for myself. Mom, I'll help you, I said finally. I could hear her exhale with relief. Oh, thank you, honey. Thank you so much. But I have conditions. What kind of conditions? First, I want a formal acknowledgement from both you and Dad that you were wrong to ask me to pay Madison's debt and wrong to ask me to give her my car. I want an apology for kicking me out of the house for refusing to enable her irresponsibility. Jessica, second, Madison needs to contribute too. I don't care if she's pursuing her dreams. If the family home is in jeopardy, she needs to help save it. I'll match whatever she contributes, up to $400 a month. She can barely afford to live in Los Angeles. Then maybe she should come home and get a stable job until you guys are back on your feet. The same way you expected me to sacrifice for her. That's not fair. It's exactly fair, Mom. It's the same standard you held me to. There was a long silence. I could hear muffled voices in the background and realized Dad was there, listening to the conversation. We need to discuss this, Mom said finally. Take all the time you need. But understand that this offer expires in 48 hours. And if I don't hear from Madison directly, asking for help and offering to contribute, then there's no deal. Madison doesn't have your number. Then you'll have to give it to her. I hung up the phone and sat in my quiet apartment, feeling strangely calm. I had learned a lot about boundaries over the past year, and I wasn't about to abandon those lessons now. 2 days later, Madison called. Jess? Her voice was small and uncertain. Hi, Madison. Mom said you might be willing to help with the house payment. That's right. She said I have to contribute too. Yep. Madison was quiet for a moment. I can't afford much. Maybe $200 a month. That works. I'll match it. Really? Really. But Madison, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this for you or because I think it's my responsibility. I'm doing this because I don't want Mom and Dad to lose their house. This is a temporary arrangement to help them get back on their feet. I get it. Do you? Because a year ago, you stood by and watched them kick me out of the house for refusing to pay your credit card bill. You didn't say a word in my defense. Madison started to cry. I know. I'm sorry, Jess. I was scared and embarrassed, and I let them make you the villain instead of taking responsibility. I've regretted it every day since. It was the first genuine apology I had received from anyone in my family. I accepted that job in LA partly to get away from the guilt, she continued. But also because I realized I needed to grow up and stop depending on everyone else to fix my problems. How's that going? Madison laughed through her tears. Terribly. I'm a terrible waitress, and my roommate's situation is a nightmare. But I'm paying my own bills, and I paid off the credit card debt myself. It took me 8 months, but I did it. I felt a surge of pride for my sister, mixed with frustration that it had taken a family implosion for her to learn these lessons. I'm proud of you for that, I said honestly. Thanks. Jess, do you think we could maybe start over? I know I don't deserve it, but I miss you. I miss my sister. For the first time in a year, I felt the ice around my heart start to thaw a little. We can try, I said. But things are going to be different. I'm not going to be anyone's backup plan or ATM anymore. I'm not going to enable poor decisions or sacrifice my stability for someone else's irresponsibility. I understand. I wouldn't ask you to. Good. Now, about Mom and Dad. They're struggling, Jess. Not just financially. Dad's really depressed about losing his job, and Mom's been crying a lot. They know they messed up with you, but they're too proud to admit it. Well, they're going to have to swallow that pride if they want my help. The next day, I got a call from Dad. Jessica. His voice was stiff and formal. Hi, Dad. Your mother told me about your conditions. Yes. I want you to know that I don't appreciate being given ultimatums by my own daughter. I waited. However, he continued, and I could hear the struggle in his voice. I may have been hasty in my reaction last year. Hasty? Dad cleared his throat. I was wrong to ask you to pay Madison's debt. And I was wrong to ask you to give her your car. And I was wrong to ask you to leave the house when you refused. It wasn't the most gracious apology I'd ever heard, but it was an acknowledgement, which was more than I had expected. Thank you, I said. Your mother and I would like to take you to dinner. To talk about things. I'd like that. We met at a nice restaurant the following Saturday. It was awkward at first, but as the evening progressed, we started to feel like a family again. Mom cried and gave me a proper apology. Dad talked about how proud he was of my independence and success, though he admitted it had taken him a while to see those qualities as strengths rather than defiance. They told me about Madison's struggles in LA, but also about her growth. She was working 2 jobs and had started performing at open mic nights. She was still chasing her dream, but she was doing it responsibly. We failed both of you girls in different ways, Mom said over dessert. We enabled Madison and expected too much from you. We're trying to do better. It took several months, but Dad eventually found a new job. It paid less than his previous position, but it was enough to cover their expenses. Madison continued sending her $200 a month until they were stable, and I kept my word about matching it. During this time, my relationship with David became more serious. He proposed 6 months later, and we started planning a wedding. My family was involved in the planning, and it felt good to have them back in my life, albeit with healthier boundaries. Madison came home for the engagement party, and we had a long conversation about everything that had happened. She had grown up a lot in LA, and while she was still pursuing music, she was doing it with a more realistic understanding of the challenges involved. I used to think that responsibility was the opposite of following your dreams, she told me as we sat in my apartment, looking through wedding magazines. But you taught me that responsibility is what makes dreams possible. I didn't teach you that, I said. You learned it yourself. Maybe. But watching you stick to your principles, even when it cost you your family temporarily, showed me what real strength looks like. Today, 2 years after that first phone call from Mom, our family is in a much better place. My parents and I have a relationship based on mutual respect rather than expectation and obligation. Madison is still in LA, but she's thriving. She got a promotion at the restaurant where she works, and her band actually got a small record deal. She's still the same dreamer she always was, but now she's a dreamer who pays her bills on time. As for me, David and I got married last month, and we bought a house together. I still have my car, the same Toyota Camry that caused so much drama. It's a daily reminder that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Looking back, I don't regret refusing to pay Madison's credit card debt or give her my car. Those decisions taught all of us valuable lessons about responsibility, boundaries, and what it really means to help someone you love. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. And sometimes, when you stand your ground, you discover that you're stronger than you ever imagined. The family that kicked me out for being selfish is now grateful for the daughter who taught them the difference between helping and enabling. It took a year of separation and a lot of difficult conversations, but we found our way back to each other. More importantly, I found my way to myself.